Hello, my name is Nelson Litsweni. I am a financial planner and I have written several books on financial planning and financial management. So today I want to be able to talk to us about a topic that we almost always talk about all the time when we talk about money, and that is budgeting. But before I go on into that, I just want to be able to say that put a disclaimer forward and say this video is just for educational purposes only, and it is not to be construed as financial advice. Of course, when financial advice is needed, it is important that the services of a trained professionals are sought. So now, the topic today I want to discuss very briefly is the budgeting and what are the budgeting principles that when you try to take charge of your money you need to do. Most people, the idea of budgeting is just a stressful thing because as far as they are concerned, a budget is a tool that is just going to restrict them and tell them what not to do with their money. But you need to think of a budget as a planning tool that allows you not only to direct or give direction to the money that you do have, but also as a tool that allows you to bring more money into the money field, into your world as well. So think of a budget as a planning tool that not just plans to spend money, but also plans other areas of money that you don't always think of as spending. All right. So most of us, when we think about a budget, we think about, I'm going to spend this or that. And so we do a spending sheet. Now you need to be able to differentiate between a spending sheet and a real budget. A real budget is not just about spending. It is about the holistic view of your finances. So I'm going to say just a few principles over here. The first principle I want you to think about when you think about a budget is don't think just in a short term like 1 month. It is a great idea to have an annual budget. When you think about great planners, and in every country, the Minister of Finance comes and states a budget, but he doesn't budget just for that month. He budgets for the whole year. And in that budget, we can learn so much more about the things that are covered in a national budget, because when you think about a national budget, it will have just about everything that you do have in your home. It will have education, it will have transport, it will have projects, a developmental budget, so to speak. It will have a recurring budget, the things that keep coming and going all the time, every month. So when you think about it, think about the fact that you can actually do an annual budget and include every single month of the year, or at least a 12-month period, because no one month is ever the same as any other month. Every month has its own challenges, and you need to be able to think about it in those things. So the first principle is don't think 1 month, think 1 year. And if you are able to think 1 year, it will be so much more easier to think 2 years or 3 years or 5 years, and before you know it, you are able to do a long-term budget that allows you to think long-term about all the projects that you want to do. The next thing that the next principle that when you start getting into budgeting itself is, remember, it is about categorizing and prioritizing. Categorize and prioritize. So you have to, I'm going to start where most of us start, which is on the spending side. And then we're going to come back to talk about the income side. And then, of course, servicing debt and building the assets. So when you start having a long-term view of a budget, it changes all this. I'm running out of money now and I need to borrow money now. And categories can include a whole lot more than just the line items. For example, if you have a category called utilities, that will be your electricity, your gas, your water. You see, those little, the water, the electricity, the gas, those are line items within your utilities budget. So you can think of another category called communication. Now, communication would include, your cell phone and your data and your internet, service provider, all those services that you do, and any other thing that is involved in your world of communication. You put it into that. So you basically go around putting things in clusters and being able to have one budget for that particular cluster, because sometimes you might use more voice than you need data. But you must know that if you use more data than voice or more voice than data, it has consumed the communication budget itself, so that you don't have the line items separately. So it's about categorizing and then prioritizing. That's a very important principle. So the first principle is think long term, not just short term. And now once you're working with it, start categorizing into different categories that you would like to work with. All right. So now the next thing that I want you to think about is, of course, we think about controlling your expenses, but you need to think about not just trying to fit into your income. You need to also think about, how do I expand my income? All right. So that is when you start budgeting on the income side. You may know that my salary or your salary is only so much, and so you're only expecting so much. But if you don't ever sit down to think, what am I going to do to increase my income? Then it's never going to go up. All right. So budgeting is an opportunity for you to plan also that which we call multiple streams of income. So which means you're going to sit down and say, this is my budget for my income. Currently, what is going on, or my income is this, but for the whole of this year, this is what additional income I would like to make. And these are the steps I would like to take to do that. See, now it makes even a greater sense to have a 1-year budget, because you might not be able to make that extra income this month, but you might make it 3 months from now if you start doing something about those projects that you want to do, that they may bring you an income for the year. So now you're going to be able to start thinking about the income budget. The income budget is not just the salary or the wage or whatever is constant that's coming in. You are going to sit down and plan your multiple streams of income. What is it that I need to do to be able to start increasing my income in the following areas? Now, what areas are those? Could be the talents that you have that you are currently not using, the knowledge that you have that you could be selling, the skills that you have that you could be using to be able to bring money back into your life, or the assets that we call lazy assets that could be making you money but are not making you money. So that's a way to think about the income side of the budget, so that you're not stuck on the budget, on the expense side. Another area that is very important that shouldn't be lost in the line items is specifically planning for debt. Now, when you are in debt already, you need to make a clean decision that says, so much of my income will go to service debt. That is what we call a debt service ratio. So if you decided that mortgage excluded, I'm only gonna spend 20% of my money to service debt over the year or over the next 2 years, then you are not going to be caught up, at some point to borrow money that you don't need to be borrowing, because you're going to think, look, if I borrow that money, the installment is going to be so much, and that installment will take me outside of the percentage that I've already set up for the year to service debt. So if you say, for this next 12 months, I'm only allocating 20% of all that is coming in towards servicing debt, that helps you to never fall into all those kind of debts that just sort of show up. Now, most people who budget just monthly and don't think about the whole year, they get caught up into the month end, debt. What we call the payday debt. Give me the money now, I'll pay you at month end. Give me the money now, I'll give you at month end. But if you have an annual budget and and you have thought about your debt properly, and you have put it into your budget to say only 20% or 30% goes towards debt, then you are always in control of your finances. So when a project or something shows up in the future and you look at it first and say, if I took this loan, how much of my debt service ratio is going to be affected? And if it's going to be above that which you have already budgeted for, then you say, I can't do it now, I'll do it next year. So you are able to start taking real control, so that it's not just issues of whatever comes my way, I'm just going to be able to do that. So budgeting on the debt side. So we talk about budgeting for your income, budgeting for your expenses using categories, now budgeting for debt, making sure that you control how much goes towards debt. Now, another area that's very important for you to think about is building your assets. How much of your monthly money goes towards long-term assets? All right? That is only going to happen if you plan it over time and you make sure that every single month a portion of your money goes towards building assets or investments, or the assets that will be able to bring money back to you. It's very important. So when we teach the money field, we talk about those 4 quadrants being your income quadrant, your expense quadrant, your debt quadrant or liabilities quadrant, and the asset quadrant. Now, one quadrant that is almost always ignored is the asset quadrant. So if it is never going to make it in your budget that you are going to put money aside for assets, then it's not going to be there. Year in, year out, there's going to be 2 years, 3 years, 5 years, and you will have no asset because it never made it onto your budget. So if you say this year, I am going to save so much money to what this particular asset, and this is what it translates to every month, then you would understand that your budget is now balanced. I'm budgeting for money coming into my income quadrant, and this is how much goes to my expenses. Now, expenses are those things where you spend money on and nothing comes back to you in terms of cash. You spend it and that's it. Now, debt, of course, you could use the debt to build your assets and budget how much of your money is going to service the debt, or depending on how you work with your debt. But a budget must be including all the 4 quadrants of the money field: income, expenses, liabilities, and asset. If you don't include asset building into your budget, you are never going to have assets for 5, 10, 20 years. It's not going to happen because there's no magic time at somewhere at the end of your work where it's just going to show up. Okay, and sometimes we think if I just took more debt, it will take care of my assets. No, it's part of the budget. So a budget is a planning tool that you're going to use to live your current life in terms of expenses categorized, or to pay debt and limited to the ratio that you have set aside for yourself. But more importantly, a budget is not a budget if it doesn't help you to build assets and to build investments. That is the little short story that I wanted to say about a budget. And of course, when you want to get involved with us, we have number of books that I have written, and some of these topics that I'm talking about have been covered in this book called The Money Field. So the budgeting principles are in this book called The Money Field, and you can get a hold of that and get extra more material that's in there. Now, everybody knows that in a short video like this, we can't cover all the material that is there. So please be in touch with us, contact us. We are on social media, and Facebook page. My Facebook page is Money Skills with Nelson Letsweni, or you can always contact our company Facebook page, which is Moedi Financial Training, and send us an email as well. Our email is at info@moedi.net, info@moedi.net, or 101silverline@gmail.com. Thank you very much. Have a great day, and please keep in touch with us. There's so much more that we can share with you. Thank you.